and also Vice Chair of Audit Committee. I will be chairing this meeting tonight only for the agenda item number 1. And the reason is because the previous chair has resigned and we need to elect a new chair. Once that is elected, then I will pass on to the new chair and move on to, and the new chair, sorry, the old chair, she has been assigned new duties, which is a overview scrutiny chair. Now we just see if there's any nomination from the House.
Yes, I would nominate Councillor Kim Nagpal to be chair of the committee.
Any second, please?
I'll second that.
Yes. So it's agreed. Congratulations. And please, can you please swap the seat and take over and proceed with the rest of the meeting, please? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for electing me chair of the audit committee for this municipal year. I'm very conscious that we have a packed agenda, so we'll go on with the order of business. So we'll start with apologies for absence and substitutions. I've received apologies from Councillor Wall, who is today being substituted by Councillor Shaw. We also have 2 new independent members in the room. If you could introduce yourselves, that would be great. Apologies, if you could use your mic. Thank you.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Sandeep Mehta, resident of Ealing and first time on the audit committee. Thank you for the welcome.
And I'm Alan Finch. I don't live in the borough, but I live in another London borough. And again, my first meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any urgent matters? No. Thank you. Are there any matters to be considered in private? No, thank you. Any declarations of interest? Great, thank you. Minutes, do members approve the minutes as the correct record of the meeting held on the 27th of February? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Okay. Okay, that moves us on to item 7, Treasury update. So we're receiving an update for Q4 and Q1, so I will take them separately. We'll start with Q1. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you. Okay, so I will take the report as read. This is for the Treasury Management Outturn update for 23-24. It's recommended that the members note the activities and performance against targets for the year period to the 31st of March 2024. Key points, just note that the council's investment balance of 511 million as at the 31st of March 24, of which 442 was invested with the Debt Management Office. And one key point is that all treasury management activities were executed by authorised officers within the parameters agreed by full council. And I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Emma. Does the committee have any questions? Alan?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and very detailed and thorough report. So thank you. And it always takes a little bit of time when you're new to a committee to get your head around these things. The borrowing position, seems to be a lot healthier than it is for, I'm afraid, some other councils at the moment who've borrowed short and been caught out by higher interest rates. So I think Ealing is in a good position in relation to that, Chair. I would focus on the investment side. I think in relation to this report, the schedule of investments at the moment has a very large amount invested in 1 to 3 month investments, which suggests to me that there's a story to that. There's a backstory that I don't appreciate. So it'd be useful to understand why that big pumped in investments that are now 1 to 3 months off maturing. And presumably there is scope in the longer run to place more funds on longer dates. And secondly, I noticed that you mentioned it, that you do use DMO investments in preference to money market funds, it would appear, and just to understand why Ealing has taken that position.
So so I'll start with your first point regarding the length of the investment. So you notice that there was between 1 to 3 months tends to be our investment. So the cash flow is closely monitored, and it's linked to obviously the capital spend and the profiling of that spend. But currently, what we're finding is DMO rates up to 6 months period are actually higher in some than a lot of the current bank rates being offered for 12 months. So if we're taking as we're investing for those 3 months, we're finding that we're getting better rates currently, or equal to better rates than, like you said, money market funds and a lot of other banks. And with the DMO, I think there's a point 25 in the outturn report that states regarding the risk and the low risk of us putting money with the DMO. So weighing those two up, where we're getting rates that are almost similar to other institutions, and then we've got that low risk of the DMO, a lot are being put in there. And we were finding that the better rates were between 1 and 3 months. DMO is restricted to 6 months. So as this is a snapshot in time, what you'll find is some of those might be maturing within that 3 month period by the end of the year, but they were put out originally for 6 months. So as you're seeing it as a snapshot, you're not seeing the overall investment of that one. So that might be why a lot of them were 3 months, because we might have had a certain amount of cash at the beginning of a certain period and then invested that for the 6 months. But as a general rule at the moment, when the cash flow is being monitored and the surplus cash is being looked at, it does appear that putting it with the DMO is giving us the lowest risk and close to some of the highest rates that we're going to get on return on our investments at the moment.
So, sorry, going forward, is there any ability to point out risks? I know you've said there were certain risks that we manage at a low level, but within the paper it'd be useful to understand the risks clearly.
Yes, of course.
If that's possible.
Yeah, fine.
And obviously we find that useful as well, so thank you. Sorry, Alan.
Yeah, I suppose a follow-up point from that, a point rather than a question, is that you are dependent on what interest rates are going to do over the next 1 to 3 months when you go out and place that money again. So that's always the issue when you have a large amount of money out on those at any kind of profile like that.
Emily, did you want to come in?
Just very quickly, you're absolutely right, and with a sort of expectation of rates falling, that's something certainly we're taking into account in terms of our monitoring. I think for some time the markets have been pricing in those reductions already, so I don't think we're going to see sort of huge shifts as those go, because they're already starting to price in those reductions.
Thank you. And We'll move on to Q1.
Yes, so Treasury Management Q1 update for 24-25. I will take the report as read, and members are recommended to note the Treasury Management activities and performance against targets. Note that the Council's investment balance of 526 million at the 30th of June 2024, of which 441 was invested with the Debt Management Office. Key point again is that all Treasury Management activities were again executed by authorised officers within the parameters agreed by the Council. And happy to take any questions on that one.
Any questions from the committee? No? Okay, thank you. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations and ask if there are any further recommendations? Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 8, which is the audit backlog update. Over to you again, Emma.
Okay, so this is the update on the national issue of the audit backlog and the proposals that have been published recently regarding backstop dates. So again, I will take the report as read, but the key points here are the backstop dates, which are found at point 8. And it was just to say that obviously regarding the meeting these backstop dates, I think obviously we've got our external auditors here who will be updating on the plans towards those and going forward later in the evening. So if there's any questions specifically on the publications and the guidance that's been sent out, I'm happy to take any questions. If there's any questions regarding the plan to meet that backstop date for the external auditors, that will be covered in the next section.
Thank you, Emma. Any questions?
Yes, and Chair, I just would like to know how many years are not audited as yet?
Okay, so currently we have 21, 22 and 23, and then the current year with the draft statement accounts that you'll see tonight, so 23 and 24.
Right. The auditors has been changed, I understand. Auditors has been changed. Who is taking responsibility for the old audits and the new audits, and when are they starting the Mazar company, the new auditors?
Okay, so Deloitte are responsible up to and including the 22-23 financial year, and Forvis Mazars, who will be presenting later on today, are taking forward, and they are contracted under PSAA for 23-24 onwards.
And Mazar is already started or still in transitional period?
So they haven't been on site, but they have been doing work because work has started in the background, certainly on the 23-24 statement of accounts.
The PSA has agreed their fee, Mazar, I understand. And have we started paying them or not yet?
So the fees for 23-24, well, in fact, all audit fees are agreed by PSAA,
yes.
That's right. And going forward in the new contract, so 23-24, payments are required to be made against agreed milestones. So I don't believe we have made any payments to Mazars yet because we haven't yet hit a milestone. So they are doing early planning work. Clearly there's work still outstanding on the earlier years, and so they aren't doing a lot of work now. They're waiting for the backstop date to hit for Deloitte to finish and conclude on their audit, and then they will come more in earnest then. But certainly the audit partner will be able to give you more of an update when he attends later. Unfortunately, he has another audit committee first, so he's coming to us later.
Okay, from here, I just need to know one more thing. Do you think there will be any adjustment in the audit fee from the previous auditors because they haven't completed the full audit? Or there will be a disclaimer when they issue the report?
So just to sort of, if I point you towards point 4 within the report, the PSA is, so it's the body overseeing most of the local audits. They will use its fee variation process to determine final fees on these local government audits at the moment. I don't know if you want to come in on the last bit.
Yes, that's right. So the fees will be determined with PSAA. We'll make a proposal, and it will be based on the amount of work that we have and haven't done. So it will be adjusted accordingly.
So whenever you pass on to the Mazar, the audit which has not been completed, obviously we issue the final audit report end of the audit period. So will be a disclaimer, or how will you finalize that report when you haven't completed the audit?
That's right. There will be disclaimer opinions on the 23 accounts, and we will we have a plan to complete the necessary procedures to issue those disclaimer opinions prior to the deadline of the 13th of December, and then Mazars, as Emma and Emily have said, have already started their planning work, but they will then take forward the 24 audit, and it would be for them to comment as to whether or not they would expect that to be disclaimed by the next deadline, which is in February.
Right. Can I ask one more question, please?
Absolutely.
Emma, the previous auditor's fee was roughly 150, roughly, and I understand these new auditors are charging 450. So why this is too much gap or increased in the fee?
So, so I think so you'll see that there's a proposal here to address the significant backlog of local government audits. So all of the sort of partners involved, the government, the audit firms, the SIPFA and others have agreed there has been sort of a system problem in relation to public audit. One of the things that they have considered is that they believe that the lowering of fees, I'm trying to think how many years ago that was, Jonathan, a good number, when the Audit Commission stopped, 2011, has caused some of that in that it hasn't allowed audit fees to audit companies, audit firms to attract, maintain, train and have staff available within the fees, and that they were too small for the audit fees to be able to, for the audit firms to be able to make a business of it. So these increases aren't particular to Ealing. The significant increase in audit fees is a level that's set overall by PSAA. Yes. So across the business, all local authorities will see significant increases in fees, and it's part of the system reset, the system solution to the backlogs that we see across the country. Jonathan may want to comment further, because I think Deloitte made a business decision, not Jonathan necessarily, but Deloitte made a business decision that this wasn't a market that was profitable, I guess, enough for the firm.
Well, on that point, there were a number of factors in our decision not to continue with the contract. But the only other thing I would add on the fee is that over a number of years since the last tender round, there have been changes in expectations and requirements of audit as well, which has significantly increased the amount of time that's spent on an audit. And actually, whilst your base scale fee is referred to was in the region of 150,000, there were variances to that for us as well over the years. So the total fee was higher than that.
Jonathan, this was my last question, which we just answered, but some part is still unanswered. When you issue the disclaimer, do you think you will be writing the reason of your resignation, or that will be purely on the basis of the accounts?
The disclaimer will just, subject to completing the necessary procedures and not other things coming up. The disclaimer would just refer to the backstop being the reason for the disclaimer. We wouldn't comment on resignation. We we made a choice around the tender process not to submit a tender for the next contract, and so you've appointed someone else. We wouldn't comment on that in our opinion.
Right. Emma, the level of increase, the PSA is negotiating the fee on our behalf. Do they understand our particular organization requirement? What is our requirement? What are our requirements as far as audit is concerned? And no, or they're just doing the formula on the basis of all the Corridor is charging this, Ealing should be paying this. So they don't recognize the requirement of Ealing.
Not particularly. So PSA will set a sort of fee based on the National Audit Office Code of Practice. So what they expect, as Jonathan said, because there's been a number of changes in the sector and regulation in the sector by the FRC, a lot of additional work has been required of the auditors, and so it's taken into account what it understands the auditors need to do to deliver a standard audit. There are variations in fee, and I think it's mainly historical, but fees do vary depending on the size of the organisation. So, and I think historically sort of gross expenditure of the organisation. So we will have a slightly higher fee than a number of slightly smaller London boroughs. We will have a slightly lower fee than other London boroughs, but they don't really take into account sort of levels of risk or it's a very standard audit. What they then would expect is if the audit were very difficult or there was very high levels of risk, that the auditor would then submit a fee variation to say that was a standard audit for a average well-controlled council. This council, I'm not saying this council, but an auditor may say another audit that we do has significant financial problems. We've had to do additional work in this, that and the other. And then my understanding is they would ask for an additional fee. So I think you start with a baseline fee, which is for a well-run organisation, and an expectation the auditor would then ask for additional fee for work that they do on top of that.
Jonathan, in the disclaimer you will be giving us whenever the time comes, in there would be qualification-based disclaimer, or purely you don't know anything about this organization? Or you will be pinpoint? Yes, we need to know this. This is very important because lots of council, has gone into bankruptcy. So we need to know what sort of disclaimer you will be giving, either on a specific point or a general disclaimer. We don't know anything.
Yeah, so I suppose I should say it's premature to say because I'm presenting the audit plan today, not a completion report. So we need to do the procedures and the work to form a view. But subject to us not. So if matters come to our attention that indicate that there is a material error in the accounts that is not corrected, so if information is provided to us in our checks to check consistency of the accounts with, say, the prior year accounts, and they're materially different, then we would qualify the opinion and have a disclaimer because there would be an error. However, subject to completing our procedures, if nothing of that type comes up, then it is just a disclaimer on the 23 accounts to say that we've not performed the audit, but we've hit the backstop, and therefore it's a disclaimer opinion.
I read in the past all the advices you were giving to our accounts department or audit department, they were not implementing those advices. Is that the same case still now, or are you aware of, or you're not aware of?
There is a limit to what we have done in terms of follow-up on control recommendations. We have over a number of years made control recommendations, and at the next meeting, when we present a report, so I should say on the 22 audit, we have done some procedures and we've got some findings, which we will report on 22. Whilst we won't finish the audit, we will be reporting some findings to you on that audit, and that will include any control points we've identified. I would say that the last time we reported, there were still a number of control recommendations outstanding, but I think that at this stage, it's for management or officers to report to you on the implementation of those controls, and then subsequently, once the new auditor is in place, presumably they would follow up to or your internal audit function.
In the process of the audit, you were analyzing the internal control system of the Ealing Council. Do you see any material qualification in there, or diversion from the system? This was in your written papers, I saw that. So I'm just seeking your advice. Is that still the same, or we have rectified that?
So I don't think I'm in a position today to give you an opinion or an answer as to whether or not the control recommendations have been implemented. I would say that we have previously reported a number of control recommendations, and some of them were significant.
They were significant.
So some of the previous control recommendations were significant, but I'm not in a position today to give you a view on which are or aren't implemented.
Thank you.
Emily, sorry.
Emily.
Before you talk, Jonathan's spoken about some recommendations that have been put forward and not cleared potentially, and these may have been discussed at a prior meeting. Can I have a look at those as to whether how they've been cleared as a separate note, if that's okay?
Emily.
Thank you. Yes. So I think that the particular material issue for which was raised previously was in relation to schools valuation. That issue was changed and amended in that set of financial statements, which we did have an opinion on 2021. So that was resolved, and it's resolved going forward. So the material issue that you talked about absolutely was raised. It's a matter of valuation. As to the other risk, we brought to this audit committee a list of those recommendations and our update on that. I think Emma and I intended to bring updated one to the next meeting, because we are absolutely following that up. Some of the concerns around non-implementation, I would say you'll understand that we've had a backlog. What that meant was sometimes things were being reported when we'd already prepared the next set of accounts. So in a way, we were a year behind to enable us to implement it, if you see what I mean. What we believe is we implemented them at the next available set of draft statements, and we have gone back to make any amendments in the sets of statements in the meantime, but they wouldn't have been subject to audit yet. So I think it's absolutely right. We ought to demonstrate that we are implementing those recommendations. I'm satisfied that we have implemented the material ones that you're right to be concerned about, and we will continue to report those to the audit committee. We have got a tracker, and we will add Jonathan's one. I think he's quite right that I would then expect Mazars to follow those up in their audits as well.
Chair, can I ask one?
Thank you, Emily. Surprise, you had another question?
Yes, please, the last one. No. Are we talking about the assets of the council? That we have completed the register of the assets of all the properties, or still we are in progress?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat?
We were preparing the assets register of the Ealing Council, yeah?
Yes.
The housing listing.
Yes.
Especially schools and houses. So have we completed those, or
yes.
Completed?
We have an asset register, complete asset register, yes. The issue was the valuation, particularly of a school, but yes, so you're quite right, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Alan?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, one more from me. In relation to the disclaimers, I mean, we're used to, in local government, we're used to qualified opinions, we're used to the occasional adverse opinion. Disclaimers is something I've not run across in local government before. I understand the auditors will need to set out in the disclaimer some of the background to that disclaimer, so it won't necessarily just appear that Ealing has been lax in its processes. But do you think there are any other risks for the council arising out of having what could be more than one set of accounts disclaimed?
So I think there are risks. I think this is really complicated. The backstop is very complicated. It is difficult to explain to a member of the public. And so reputationally, we are left with a disclaimer opinion. And you're quite right, that disclaimer opinion should and will, I'm sure, set out the reason and the backstop. But that's quite difficult just to explain to someone who just looks at an opinion and said it's disclaimed. So I think there's reputational risk there that we need to properly manage and to explain to people, because I've never had a qualified audit opinion or a disclaimed audit opinion, and I don't want one either. But we are where we are, and this is a national decision to reset. So I think there are risks, reputational risks, and we will have to do our best to explain to public and others. I don't think there's any other significant risks. We don't have any significant loan agreements that require us to deliver unqualified accounts. There are some councils that do have specific loan agreements that say they need unqualified accounts. There is also huge risk in me just not having 2 years worth of audit opinions. So I'm not sure that the reputational risk is much worse having a disclaimer that just finishes it all off and draws a line under it, compared to explaining why I have 2 years of audits outstanding, a third possibly on its way. So but there are no specific things that we've noticed. Like I said, I've had 2 years outstanding for some time. The only query we often get is from a government department to say, have you had your audited accounts yet? And I keep saying no, and nothing has happened. So I don't see any significant consequences other than managing that sort of reputational risk, which we would have to refer to the public documentation. If I may, Chair, it is very complicated. And as an external auditor, I find this, ex-external auditor, I find this very complicated. The FRC has just published what it's calling an accessible guide to this, which I think we've circulated to everyone. I think it's I'm not sure if it is accessible, but it does aim to sort of try to simply explain the sort of reset and sort of that it doesn't necessarily mean that there are weaknesses in the council's financial reporting. As I think Jonathan said, if they identify areas, they can't say that they've picked them all up, but if they identify areas during the course of their procedures, they will report that to you. So there may be some comfort to the audit committee in that the disclaimer doesn't let me get away scot-free and say that I'll prepare anything because they're disclaiming it anyway. They will still have a duty to report anything that they identify during their procedure.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you for the questions. That moves us on to item 9, which is the external audit update for financial years 22-23. We are joined today by Dina Pewters and Jonathan Gooding from Deloitte. Welcome, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So we've already covered a reasonable amount of this, but so you have 2 reports in your pack today. I'll talk through the first one, which is an audit planning report, briefly, and happy to take any questions. And then Dina will talk through a final report on the 22 audit of the pension scheme, which is nearing completion. So regarding the planning report, we're required to issue this audit plan for the 22-23 year end audit, which, as we've said, we would anticipate issuing a disclaimer opinion at this stage. I think that the previous paper has already given a lot of the background around the backstop, so I don't propose to go through that in detail, but just to reiterate, the critical date is the 13th of December, is the backstop date for everything up to 22-23, and then there's a date in February for 24. There are a number of things that the authority and we have to do before that date to enable us to issue a disclaimer opinion. For the council, that includes updating the accounts for any known adjustments, completing appropriate internal review processes and controls over those accounts, and certifying the accounts. And then for us as auditors, we need to complete a number of procedures. So there's certain planning procedures that we have to do, which are largely complete, which is why we're issuing this report. We have to complete our value for money responsibilities and report those to you for all open years of accounts. So those won't be left unfinished. The scope of the work is slightly adjusted though, as part of the new guidance around this backstop. We need to complete we would need to complete any outstanding work on objections to the accounts, but you didn't have any, and so that's not relevant. We have to perform certain procedures with respect to the accounts, and we set out the details of those in the report, but things like checking that the opening balance is agreed to the prior year, and to other information that we have available. And we have to issue certain reports to you, including our annual auditor's report, which includes our value for money commentary. We've set out the details of the value for money work in the report. At this stage, we're anticipating identifying a risk of significant weakness, as we did the year before, in relation to governance arrangements. And then the other elements of this audit planning report set out the basis of our materiality, which we're required to determine, which we've set at about 26 million for the 23 audit. We've also included a reminder of the 2021, which was the last full year audit that we completed, audit adjustments. And we reconfirm our independences in this report and set out details of fees. Maybe just pause and take questions on the first report and then hand over to Dina, if that would be okay.
Sure. Any questions on that report? Sure. Surprise.
Jonathan, you just mentioned the importance of the opening balances. Now, I need to understand, when you haven't completed the audit for 2023, how Mazar will be able to start the audit? That they won't have the opening balances audited by you. And I don't understand as an auditor myself, how will they start the audit, or from where they will take from to start the audit?
Yeah, well, I think probably Suresh later will probably take you through their plan around that. But I would expect that subsequent years, until assurance has caught up, that the following year there's likely to be a qualification in respect of the opening balances, because they won't be able to take assurance over those opening balances. So
they will do themselves their due diligence. That's what we are saying.
They'll audit the year end, but they won't be able to take assurance over the opening balances, and I wouldn't expect them to audit those opening balances either. There'll be certain procedures they can perform, but they'll I would still expect there to be qualification around the opening balances.
So they will create opening balances themselves?
Sorry?
How will they, from where will they find the opening balances? From our accounting department, or which is not audited?
Yes, they'll be unaudited, that's right. Yeah.
They will take it from there, yeah.
So I'm sure Suresh will be able to explain more. So unfortunately, the backstop doesn't end this now or in February. There are a number of years where it is expected that auditors will have to rebuild that assurance on the opening balances. So we may well have disclaimers or qualifications. It's expected for the next sort of four years. I'm certainly going to speak to Suresh about building that assurance up as quickly as possible, because I'd like to have a clean opinion as quickly as possible. But it will depend on the amount of resource and time that team has available, because as you're very clearly understand here, those opening balances are really important for him to put the revenue position for the year as well. So there is expected over this process that for a number of years, it will require them to undertake, as Jonathan said, not necessarily an audit, but a number of procedures to build up that assurance on our opening balances. So that will take some time.
So it means the fee, which is 450, we should expect that will be double then.
So we may,
if they're doing more work, they will be asking more price.
So that is right. Jonathan might blunt this. I'm also expecting to pay less fee for the 2 audits that we haven't had completed. They will obviously need to charge us the fee for the work. So my expectation is I will set that aside to pay for the additional work that the next auditors will need to do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Thank you, Alan.
Yes, just a clarification, I think, Jonathan, on what you said. Did I understand you correctly that we will get the value for money commentary on the 2 years by the backstop date as well, by the 30th of December?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, can I ask the committee to note the update and ask if there are any further recommendations? No, thank you. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Dina, I'm expecting. My apologies, I've skipped through. Dina, thank you.
So I'm here to present the final report of the pension fund for the 31st of March 2022, which is very near completion. So we will issue an opinion on on the financial statements of the pension fund for the year ended 31st of March 2022. I will take the report as read, and I'll just highlight some items. So we identified 2 significant risks as part of the audit: management override of controls, which we can't rebut, and then there is the valuation of alternative assets and the disclosure of investments within the accounts. We have finalized our work on both those significant risks. The only thing to note was with regards to the disclosure of the investments, there was a material misstatement which has been adjusted in the meantime in the fair value hierarchy, where some investments had been put in the wrong pocket. That has been adjusted in the amended accounts. And then on page 1, we basically note that there are a number of outstanding items, the biggest being the assessment of the IS 26 disclosures, which is disclosed in the as an appendix to the pension fund accounts. That work is still outstanding.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Thank you, Dina. Any questions?
Can I ask?
Sure, surprise.
Yes, and Dina, the audit of pension, it means that will be qualified as well?
So
when you said it's a material depart, so it means there will be a qualification?
No. So we noted a material disclosure issue. We requested the council to amend. They've amended, so that is absolutely fine. It won't affect our opinion.
Thank you. Are there any further questions?
Just one, please.
Sure, Sandy.
You mentioned management override. This is just an inherent risk you're mentioning here, is that correct? So, okay.
Yes, so under ISA 240, I believe, we cannot rebut that. So we do work around management override of controls. We look at the internal controls surrounding the financial reporting network, the financial reporting controls network, and then also we look at journals testing as detailed testing. So we look in detail at journals. We do a number. We let our software loose on it, which interrogates 100% of the population and basically identifies the highest markers that could be subject to fraud.
And so it's just inherent risk. You
It's an inherent risk, yes.
Of management override or anything like that, just inherent.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. In that case, I will ask members to note both reports and ask if there are any recommendations. No, thank you. That moves us on to item 10, statement of accounts for quarter 4. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you. So I will again take the report as read. This is a recommendation for the Audit Committee to note the report, the Appendix 1, which is the draft statement of accounts, and the publication date of the draft statement of accounts on the 31st of May 2024. I suppose the key point here is that the period of exercise of public rights did commence on the 3rd of June for 30 days, as required by the Local Audit and Accountability Act 2014. If anybody has any questions on that, I'm happy to take them.
Any questions? Alan?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm always difficult to know what to ask about the draft accounts. Nothing leaps out that suggests that we shouldn't refer them for audit. Just a couple of things arising from the narrative statement first. The overspend in relation to 23-24, which was covered off essentially by extra income from investments arising from higher interest rates, which you could say was perhaps a bit of a windfall. And it would be helpful to understand how that's been brought into account in setting the budget for 2024-25 and going forward. And secondly, noting that the BSG has slipped into deficit, and again, I'm conscious that lots of authorities are in a much worse position in relation to BSG. But in this year, 23-24, Ealing's has slipped into deficit, I assume for the first time. In general, what actions are being taken to bring that back into a balanced position?
Thank you. Yes, you're absolutely right. So, yeah, and I use exactly the same term as you with my SLT when talking about the Treasury as being a windfall and saying that we can't rely on that in the medium term, and Cabinet as well are well aware of that. So your question essentially is, so we have an underlying, or we had an underlying overspend therefore at the end of 23-24, and how do we take that into account in medium term planning? So on a gross level, we put a net, so we overspent by 23 million, and we put a net 23 million pound of growth into the budget for 24-25. So on a gross level, that should put us into a balanced position as you start the year. So we've not sort of carried over significant sort of overspends, hoping that they would go away. Having said that, our Q1 position now finds additional pressures in these areas, particularly adults, children's, but now specifically temporary accommodation is causing a significant pressure. So my view is it was addressed as we set the budget in that position in 23-24 was set in the budget for 24-25, 24-25 now experiencing additional pressures to that, which will lead to either manage or seek to address in the next year's budget 25-26. But I'm not one to sort of carry over overspends and hope they'll go away in the next year. Having said that, we still do within the budget expect that higher level of Treasury income, and over the medium term, both with an assumption on reducing interest rates and an assumption on reducing cash balances as our capital programme comes through, we are sort of forecasting in that reduction in Treasury income. So DSG, yep. A real shame. We had been doing really well, as you say, in a national issue in relation to SEN, children with special educational needs and education places. As you've indicated, it is a national pressure as the number of children with education, health and care plans has increased. It is a national pressure because the cohort of children and young people increased a number of years ago because of changes in legislation which extended the cohort, but also we've seen significant pressures in relation to COVID. So we're seeing a lot more children, young people come through with speech and language issues because of the couple of years in key areas of development. So we're seeing demand shoot up in that area. And as you say, for the first year, a deficit last year. So as a result of that deficit, DfE quite rightly comes out to any authority with a deficit and says, please can you now complete a deficit management plan? So we are in discussions with the DfE on that management plan, and we're meeting them in November, a couple of months' time. So we've been working on a management plan for some time. This is difficult. I can't say that we will crack it because frankly, the sector would say there is not enough money in this area. Nevertheless, we need to try to manage it as far as we can. So it's a matter of managing demand, so supporting children and young people with their education needs before they need to get to a EHCP, increasing the sufficiency of local placements. So we had a cabinet report, was it this month or the month before? I think it was this month, on additional resource provision. So where we're adding resource provision for SEN onto our mainstream schools and working on inclusion and also just reviewing all funding adjustments, making sure that we are charging the right things into the high needs block, that we're not charging what we shouldn't. So it's a number of things. I cannot say that I am confident that we will be able to balance it because this is a national pressure where funding essentially isn't sufficient for the need and the demand that's coming through. But we will continue to try our very best. There is a statutory override, I suspect that you know, and you'll see it in a really strange figure in a negative reserve in the accounts. The council is not allowed to subsidise this funding. It is education funding. It is not allowed to subsidise it, so it must hold a negative figure on the reserve. That's not particularly comfortable either for me. So we would, to the extent that there is a statutory override, I would also always need to ensure that we've got reserves to meet that should it fall due.
Can you use your mic, please, Alan? Thank you.
We're not in, Ealing is not in this territory yet, but some authorities have very large deficits, and while you don't have to fund the deficit under the legislation Emily referred to, you have to finance those deficits when they get very large. So it is something that Ealing would want to make sure it keeps under control.
Thank you, Alan. Are there any further questions from the committee? No, thank you. Can I ask members to note the report and ask if there are any further recommendations? Okay, before we move on, Dina and Jonathan, you're welcome to stay until the rest of the meeting. You're welcome to leave. It's entirely up to you. Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming. Okay, so we'll move on to item 11, which is the Q4 reports. I believe this has been presented by Mike today.
Thank you. I can't believe they're leaving at the best point. Just to prove that I did some work over the summer, I thought I'd bring you my Q4 reports. But on a serious note, these are obviously essential governance documents that would be remiss if we didn't bring them to those charged with governance. So we have the annual governance statement. This is the one document I do with the organisation and not independently. One of my colleagues described it as he's the typist, which I really quite like. So it's me providing this document, working with governance experts, including Emily, the strategic director for strategy, the legal and HR directors. And we also require each of the strategic directors to provide an annual positive assurance statement, which is essentially saying everything's okay or flagging where it's not. That feeds in, along with other assurance sources, including external assessments, the risk register, and my internal audit opinion. And then we consider whether there's any material issues that we wish to raise, or the most material issues that we want to raise, and that goes into the annual governance statement. I felt it was important to set the scene on that one. I'm again assuming you've read it, but I'll take any questions on that before I move on to the Q4 document.
Any questions from the committee?
Yes, please.
Surprise.
Yes, Mike, as far as audit committee, the purpose of the audit committee is to ensure the reliability, effectiveness of the financial reporting, internal control systems, and the risk management. Taking only the internal audit for the time being, is it possible we can have 3-monthly complete internal audit report presented to us here so we can see what sort of mistakes are coming and how we are dealing with those? I know you are sending in a summary form, but detailed, so we can see, or if somebody is interested, can read the full report, or.
So there's an element of careful what you wish for. If we were to provide all the full reports to committee, this document would turn from being kind of 10 to 15 pages to 100 to 150 pages. We are required through the internal audit standards to highlight the key areas that we feel you should be aware of, which is what we do, and the report's been designed to do. We are happy to make available any reports to committee members if you've got questions resulting from the summary that we provide to you, which is the practice that's normally followed. As you recall, previously you've raised this question and we agreed with the then chair, and we're happy to discuss with the current chair the process that we would provide the reports in a folder so that if committee members wanted to look at the reports, they can do. And I think that to me would be the best way forward, because like I say, providing all of those reports just makes a very hefty document, and some of it, as I say, you're welcome to have it, but I just proceed with caution because it just makes such a hefty document. And I previously members have been happy with the format of the report, and then it highlights that. And as I say, when you see that document, if there are reports that you then wish to delve into in more detail, we can then provide those. But happy to discuss and agree a process with the new chair.
Any further questions?
Yes, Mike, what will be the materiality level when you are saying in summary form? What will be the materiality level you will be giving us?
So it's the report that we provide to each committee.
Yeah, what will be the level of up to what amount you will be thinking this is important, we should be submitting to the committee? Material level.
So we provide a summary on any of the limited and any of the low assurance, limited or no assurance reports. We provide a summary detail to yourselves of those concerns, and then we also provide an update on any of the high recommendations that and status until they're implemented.
That is fine, but I'm looking for the materiality level. What do you think is important for you to give us? Like, for example, mistake of 20 million, mistake of 2 million, mistake of 500.
Our reports, as you know, deal with risk, not just finance. So in terms of materiality, I can't give you a definitive figure. We would raise a concern over a control or a risk. So it's so anything that we consider high risk, and we define the levels of risk within the recommendations, and we define the overall assurance levels within the report that we provide to yourselves.
The high risk, what you think, maybe that high risk is for us is very high, and we want to minimize that high risk. So if you give us a limit, so read your summary, yes, this is the level is of the summary report which Mike has given us. You understand what I'm trying to get?
Mike, are we touching on that in the in the item covering risk management?
We'll be covering it in the audit report, so the next report and the Q1 report. But so we set out a plan with all of our with all of the reports that we intend to cover, the risk and materiality of those areas, and we bring that to committee at the start of the programme, and then during the year we report back on all of those and we report back on our findings. So you should have a good idea from those reports of how we consider the materiality of those and
Okay.
that links.
That was my yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're happy? Great, thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Great. Mike, if you'd like to move on to the next stage of this item.
Thank you. So Appendix B is an update of the work that was completed during the year, which sets out all of the reports and insurance levels. During the year, we reported through courses 1 to 3 and provided summaries where appropriate. And then in this report is the work completed in Q4. All of that work is pulled together and assessed, and I give an annual opinion. That opinion this year was reasonable. Higher is substantial, although for an overall system of control for a council and framework, it's very rare that a substantial assurance would be given. So this is kind of as good as it gets. It's an improvement on previous years where we've had to give a limited assurance report, and I think working very hard with council and management to try and ensure that recommendations are actioned, that they're building frameworks of assurance themselves to get those assurances during the year, and to try and flag early warnings internally to try and ensure that a problem area is identified and it's not just for audit to come in and bayonet the wounded. So that's the kind of framework for this. Within that report, because it was already drafted for Q4, we have got updates on the recommendation, but I'd draw committee's attention probably to the Q1 ones because they are the latest position. So it's unusual that we're bringing this report, but it was essentially because of the July cancellation at this time. But obviously that opinion also feeds into the annual governance statement, so you needed that for your work on the annual governance statement too. Any questions on that part of the paper, please?
Chair, I have a question, but
Sure.
it's not directly relevant, but it is in a way. Somebody can give us the update on the collection of Section 106 contribution? And I understand that was not collected for so many years, and what was the reason? And if that was the case, then why the internal audit department didn't pick it up in time, and we are so behind to collect the contribution? These are my questions.
Is that one for Emma? Emily, thank you.
Yeah, so the internal audit was completed on that. I am not aware of any significant issues in terms of collection. We hold a number of cash balances in relation to Section 106 for which we have plans to spend that. So you will have seen, I'm trying to think how many months ago, the highways programme that's been agreed by Cabinet, and that is utilisation of the Section 106 balances that have been collected. There has been an implementation of a new system for Section 106, which helps better monitor and report that spend. I'm not clear that there has been a collection issue, that we have significant outstanding debt. There are a number of 106. The nature of Section 106 arrangements is that we might agree at the beginning of that planning agreement a number of strands of payment that are paid over the life cycle of that development. So some money is due at the beginning when they go on site. Some money will only be due to us once, exactly. So we can only, whilst we might at the very beginning agree amount, that amount isn't due to us. That amount becomes invoiced at a later date. And then, so in terms of collection, I mean, it is a statutory fee where an organisation is still solvent. it must pay its Section 106. So we don't have significant unpaid Section 106 debts.
I'm sorry, I'm not picking up a point, but I'm trying to see the effectiveness of internal control system. Now, the question is again, I know this was lot of amounts is pending. That is the reason, that is the very reason, because the new department is sending letters to everybody now to collect the Section 106, and why this area was not picked up earlier on.
So my understanding is that it wasn't an issue of billing. There may well have been a bill or two that were brought up to date. My understanding is it wasn't a question of billing. The reason why we have high cash balances is that there was a period, particularly during COVID, where we were, like a lot of construction, unable to spend those funds. So we have the cash in hand. We currently have significant amounts of Section 106 cash in hand. We just cannot, we could not over the past period spend it. That's what the new system as well will support, us being able to report the spending against those Section 106s as well.
It's a very open question now.
Sure, thank you.
I'm sure there are lots of bills you forgot to issue to lots of the developers, yes? Now, I'm coming back again on the effectiveness of the internal control system. How does that happen? And when you are saying our internal control system of this big, which is more than £1 billion project in the budget of this company, and what sort of internal control system we have when we forgot to issue the bills even? I have the knowledge and I have the report. Let me tell you this.
So I'm not aware of any significant billing issue. There certainly was an issue that we felt that the reporting of management and reporting of Section 106 was not as effective as it could be, and we've implemented a new system. Internal Audit did raise a number of recommendations in its audit for 22-23, and a number of those were addressed through the implementation of the new system.
This is, and the reason I'm saying this, I'm a developer as well. I received a letter. I shouldn't be giving personal examples, but just to demonstrate, the new department has I received a letter from them. When are you starting your development? While my agreement is I should be paying at 80% development. Yes, this is the question, the answer of sure. Now, my question is, how come we forgot to issue the bills initially? Where the Section 106 was due, and we did not issue the bills and we did not recover the money.
And I think there was an internal audit report in 22-23 which gave limited assurance to the council. So the internal audit picked up and said to the council there was limited assurance in its audit in 2022-23. And those have now been addressed through the implementation of the new system. So I think what you're saying is, were there control weaknesses? Yes, those were identified by internal audit in 22-23. Did the council then take action to address those control weaknesses? Yes, so we can now be assured that those are in place, and it sounds like you are now seeing the results of that.
Just laughing because we are seeing our internal control system is working effectively, yes, and while we forgot this amount, yes. Sorry, I forgot my question. I'm sorry. Oh.
So can I just say, I think in 2023 we weren't saying our internal control system was working effectively. We gave an overall limited opinion. The opinion I've just given is reasonable, and I think what Emily is saying is that the report and Section 106 raised concerns, and obviously we're following those up and we're seeing progress against those, and those have been actioned. So actually, what you're seeing is the impact of the weaknesses that we identified being improved. So yes, you're right to flag those. We did flag those in 2023. We did flag overall concerns in 2023. the report that you've just received was in relation to 23-24, where things have improved, and we're recognising that. So I think it's just timing.
This is, I accept it. This is, I agree with you. This has been improved, but my concern of giving us a report of internal audit on quarterly basis, this is the main reason, so we can see as well if there is any input we can give to you and which can enhance or we can improve our system, that will be beneficial for our council.
I think that's a great proposal, and I think outside of this meeting we can perhaps have a discussion about how we can get those documents to the committee and address any concerns that the committee might raise at that point. Sure, Sandy?
Yeah, and I guess what I want to point out also, I mean, it's not audit's responsibility really to, they give assurance over the controls within the environment that they look at. It's management's responsibility, so that's a very clear thing. So Mike isn't the person who's responsible for the internal controls environment. He's providing us assurance that it's operating effectively on an independent basis by going and doing bits of work he does. What we do need to do is to support him in that process. And that could be bringing people who aren't doing what they should be to the audit committee to tell us why they can't do what they're not doing.
Thank you, Sandeep, for that contribution. That was helpful. Are there any other further questions from the committee? Mike, are you finished with this item? Great. Okay, then I will ask the committee to note the reports and ask if there are any recommendations. Alan, sorry, I know you emailed this to me, but I just wanted, if you'd like to propose it in front of the committee, your recommendation, we'd happily consider it.
Yeah, sorry, I lost track of the agenda slightly. We covered the annual governance statement, which, I mean, the annual governance statement is becoming a really important document. It always was for council, becoming even more important because of what we've already heard about the difficulties of the external audit system and the way in which governance has been highlighted in some of the high profile failures of local authorities that we've seen. So it's important that the annual governance statement, I think, holds the council to high standards. The auditors will comment on our annual governance statement, but I wondered if the issues that are related to 23-24, and which are on page 191 of the agenda, appendix 1 of the report, could be turned into an action plan with milestones for delivery and indication of responsible officers, and then perhaps brought back to us at a midpoint during the financial year, but with the agreement of the committee and officers are happy. I think that would be helpful as a way to show that we are taking the annual governance statement seriously.
Thank you for that recommendation, Alan. And is the committee happy to agree that as a way forward? And officers okay with that? Great, fantastic. Okay, noted. We will move to item 12, which is the progress report on the work of internal audit and anti-fraud for Q1. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. So a slightly quieter report with one report finalised during the period, which was a limited assurance, and I've provided details and summary of that report. The report also includes the work of the investigations team and some of the highlights from the anti-fraud activities that we undertake during the year and response to reactive investigations. We also provide a table listing the high recommendations that weren't implemented by the time they were due. I'm pleased to advise that kind of since publication, I've been advised of 2 updates relating to the HR policies and the public health reports, and we should be able to confirm to the next meeting that they've actually been implemented. So they're always progressing as live, and we do challenge management to try and ensure that they're acting upon these recommendations, and the whole process works quite well as we feed into the audit committee. The remaining recommendations we continue to track until such time as they're fully implemented and report back to the committee. Any questions on that report?
Any questions from the committee? Alan?
Sandeep already referred to the option to bring management in where recommendations of audit are taking a long time to implement. That I just wanted to highlight, I suppose, for the committee that we had, subject to Mike's update just now. Thanks, Mike. That we had in this report 12. I think limited or assurance reports where recommendations were outstanding, and I just wondered about what officer's view was in terms of how we might encourage management to respond to those a little bit more quickly in future.
Mike, would you like to address the question?
Thank you, Chair. So always welcome the support. And I think where actions, I mean, all of these are now progressing. Historically, there was some where I felt I was pushing rocks uphill through treacle and the wind coming against me, and I would have welcomed people being brought in on those. I think it would be useful to consider if there are cases and examples where I don't think there is enough traction, and probably highlighting those to the chair to consider if we bring individuals in to kind of explain to you rather than make excuses to me would always be useful. I think the threat of a 7 o'clock meeting usually is sufficient to get them to do something. But you know, equally, I think if there are any that you have concerns about, just mentioning at this meeting that you would, if it's not action by next time, quite often that threat is sufficient to get a bit of momentum from management ahead of the next meeting as well. So I welcome your support on that.
Emily, did you want to come in?
Thank you. You've mentioned the annual governance report being really important, and in seeing some of the failures in the local government sector. I think one of the other flags in the local government sector, when we've then seen sort of councils enter into troubles, has been not implementing audit recommendations. So it's certainly something that the SLT take very seriously. So we take these actions in. Mike comes to us quarterly, although we're now starting to sort of follow up more frequently. SLT, certainly around the table, has said we are not happy at this being in double figures. We've said this must be and remain below 10, well below 10. So it is a priority for us. It's not a comfortable place to be. I think a number of these are quite old now. And some of them I think we probably needed to have earlier, a more mature conversation about how the risks might be mitigated a different way, or how things may have moved on and the recommendation and the action changes. I think because there have been changes in SLT, we sort of picked up a number of legacy recommendations where we needed to have that more mature conversation. We expect certainly those newer ones to clear much quicker, but we still need to clear one way or other by mitigating the risk of the old ones, and it's something the SLT do take seriously, and it's important that we do it. I have to say that I am not as clean as everybody else because I have one in here myself. So I've got plans to do that, and that's implementing a capital board.
Thank you, Mike and Emily. Is the committee happy to accept that as a recommendation? Yes, agreed. Great. Okay, so I'll ask the committee to note the report and ask if there are any further recommendations. Yep. Great. Okay, that moves us on to item 13, risk management, and this one is you again, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Attached is the strategic risk register. For the benefit of new members, I think it's important to flag that we have a relatively new SLT. They don't like to be called the new SLT anymore because there's a point where it becomes. And with them, we sat down and said, "Here's the risk register," and they went, "Do we recognise all of these things?" And we did a fresh workshop probably about 12 months ago to refresh all of the risks, and that became a bit of a moving feast as they became more and more embedded in the organisation and learned some of the key risks. So it's I think it's worth highlighting that it's a relatively new strategic risk register, but reflects a lot of conversations and debate and challenge around what actions we need to be taken. And I think it's been a very positive debate, but now there needs to be kind of more action and more challenge around it to keep it moving. And I think all SLT and reflect on that. We've gone from kind of having quarterly meetings to discuss it to recognising that needs to be more often. But there is always ongoing conversations about individual risks in the interim. We've also introduced, as part of the internal audit plan, an intention to deep dive on some of these risks because they are quite new. We haven't done that yet, but we will be picking a couple where we actually, it's not auditing the risk management process, it's actually going in and saying, is this risk still current? Is this score reflective? You've set out these mitigations, you've set out these implementation dates, where's the evidence? And just doing those, and those will start to as that process starts to embed. I think hopefully that will challenge this process to be more and more effective, but also give committee more assurance that people are acting on these risks and doing what they say they are. Any questions on this report, please?
Sometimes the concept of tolerance is brought into risk management. Is it something you've considered? So, at the moment, would you say all of these are out of tolerance, hence you're looking at mitigating them? So you can start taking a bit of a risk-based approach around risk, where you say, this is within tolerance or out of tolerance. Yes, you would look at whether controls exist to mitigate that risk, to ensure your tolerance is sort of like supported. But have you looked at tolerance levels around your risks?
Yes, in simple terms, but I think it's a fair challenge as you know, the sector has a number of we have a number of risks that don't go away, and I think we utilise this as an opportunity to revisit some of those from time to time and challenge whether we're doing enough. I think if it was a commercial organisation, you might stop some of these services, but we can't because they're statutory. And I think some of the areas you wouldn't tolerate any kind of level of risk, and you try and manage them as much as possible. But it's a fair challenge and something I think we can take away and discuss with SLT those considerations, and whether we're kind of we regularly have that challenge of do some of these things need to stay on here because we're not necessarily doing any more, and we're just ongoingly managing them. I think that probably frames your question quite nicely, but it's kind of useful to have them on there to make sure that we are continuing to do what we need to, if that makes sense.
Just a side question on cyber and data. which is one of the largest risks out there at the moment, potentially for lots of businesses. What I note is penetration testing doesn't seem to be listed. Is that something that's within that remit of risk that you're looking at to be managed? Cyber risk to mitigations, I can't see penetration testing.
I think that's just kind of business as usual. It is done. It is.
Okay,
it is
sure.
so
Okay.
business as usual. I think
Yeah.
it's just not in there as
Maybe
it's
worth
kind of
pointing in there.
standard control
Okay.
rather than an additional mitigation. But yeah, we'll look at whether we should explicitly state that.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any further questions? Alan?
Thank you, Chair. I guess that this is slightly tricky because the report, as we receive it, the corporate risk strategy is the very top level of a whole framework that sits underneath it. And as a new member, it's certainly be helpful for me to see a copy of that risk framework document to understand a bit better how the council is identifying risk. Sort of deciding whether to accept it or mitigate it or avoid it. And how that plays through in services and in projects and programs, for example. So if possible, I'd like to see that. In terms of the report, I suppose sort of picking up Sandeep's point, the mitigated risk scores in the table you could see as target risk scores, thereby giving an indication of risk tolerance in each area. That's possibly how I would read them. But I suppose it would be helpful in future iterations to see a bit more the separation of new activities in mitigation as against, as you're referring to, Mike, sort of background, ongoing business as usual type mitigations. And under cyber and data, I agree with Sandeep of its importance. That threat monitoring is shown as implemented. Well, threat monitoring is ongoing. If it's anything, it's happening all the time. So what exactly has been implemented around threat monitoring? Bringing some of that, more of that out, I think might be helpful. Finally, Chair, in other authorities, I am aware of audit committees bringing back individual risk themes for deep dives from time to time, just to understand a bit more about the risks that are inherent there and to go into and delve a little bit more deeply into how the council is managing them. So that's something that we might choose to do in the future.
Thank you, Alan. Mike, do you have anything to add?
Again, I think I'd support that, as you talked about the cyber stuff and maybe even potentially a training session in advance of one of these meetings to set out some of the stuff that we do and to give members both an awareness of that as a risk in itself, but some background on kind of how we as a council manage that might be useful too.
Thank you, Mike. I am going to ask if it, I beg your pardon. Dee.
So probably very similar point, but I just thought it was interesting that some of the areas that, for example, regulatory compliance got quite a high level at the start, and then after the mitigation, it's only 12. I just wondered how confident we are that those mitigations had really brought it down that much. And I'm thinking particularly, I think we did refer ourselves, didn't we, on housing issues to the Ombudsman not that long ago. So just to make sure that we aren't, overdoing the sort of impact of the measures we put in place, really.
I tell you, I think the key thing is that the mitigations are, once fully implemented, will get us to there. So it's not, we're not saying we're there yet. It's saying once all of those actions are in place, that's where we would hope to be. So we're kind of between the big red flashing light and the assurance level there, but we're continuing to work on it. And I think that's why it's so risk management is so essential to ensure we continue to have those conversations so that management are taking those actions, moving those things forward and ensuring progress.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, thank you. So I will ask the committee to note the report, and I will ask if we are happy to take Alan's recommendation to bring high risk issues back for a deep dive. Agreed? Thank you. Okay, I've just noticed that we've got Suresh in the room from Mazars. So before we move on to the annual work programme, I think I'll ask Suresh to address us on the external audit verbal update for the financial year 24. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. First of all, let me just say thank you for rearranging your agenda to allow me to attend in person. I was keen to attend in person. I think there's only as much as I can do in terms of what I'm obviously going to talk about. I wasn't here for obviously the early agenda item, but I've seen the paper, so I know that what your previous auditors are planning in terms of 21, 22 and 22, 23. And I know from your papers you've had an indication, and that is where a similar position for the 23, 24. So in light of the revised backstop date, which you probably aware moved from what was meant to be the end of May 25 for 23, 24 accounts to the end of February, a loss of 3 months. We have had to make some tough decisions about which audits we can complete in full by that date. And I've made the decision that Ealing is not one of those councils that we audit in London. Appreciate that's very disappointing to hear, and it's not clearly something I want to say on my first engagement with you as a committee. I've had discussions with Emily and Emma about this for a number of months, but that movement of the 3 months has been the critical thing. So prior to that, I had actually had a plan for all 7 of the London boroughs that we audit to be done by the end of May. And then obviously September whatever it was, the 10th or whatever, when the final legislation got laid, put in statute those backstop dates. So I appreciate, like I say, that's not a good message for me to give on my first engagement with you. Also, I'm acutely aware of the position you've been in for the last 2 or 3 years. And actually, we've had really good engagement with Emily and Emma in terms of starting audit procedures, which we have done, but clearly there's only so much we can do while previous years are open and unsigned. So what that disclaimed audit opinion will look like and what it means in practice is currently still being finalised. So the National Audit Office finally published some guidance about 2 weeks ago. It was very high level, but it was a start. Discussions are ongoing between audit firms, the FRC, the National Audit Office and MHCLG about the extent of work that you need to carry out to disclaim an audit opinion. And I know colleagues from Deloitte have presented to you a plan in terms of what they are proposing to do. We will bring something similar to you. The bigger challenge is how we then go about rebuilding assurance. And being candid with you, the fact that you will have unaudited accounts for 3 years makes that even more difficult and challenging, and I haven't got the answers yet, but my intention would be to bring to this committee a plan to show how we plan to rebuild that assurance. But it won't be quick. It won't be 1 year, it won't be 2 years, it might be 3 years, it might be more. That's the reality of the situation. I'm having similar discussions with a number of other bodies that I audit, and it's a very complicated, very difficult position. But if you read the minister's letter, they're expecting hundreds of disclaimed audit reports to be issued for 23-24, not tens, 20s, but hundreds. And that as a consequence of reducing that time scale that was in there in the first place. So internally, we're working on our plans in terms of how we rebuild that assurance. But as I say, and just being open and honest with you, I think for where we've got an audit where we've got 2 or 3 years that haven't been audited before, that creates even more problems. But what it means for you, I suppose, as an authority, because it's what I'm getting asked all the time, is that there are, I mean, the government have made it clear that there are no penalties, there are meant to be no adverse impact of having a disclaimed audit opinion as a result of these backstop plans. Our reporting will make that clear in the narrative reporting that we produce. The audit opinion itself, I suspect, will be quite short and succinct in terms of we're disclaiming because we haven't finished the audit, words to that effect. But I'll share the detail once I know it. So I appreciate it's not a great situation to be in. I appreciate all the hard work that the finance team have put in to actually publish their accounts, which isn't the case in all places where we are disclaiming audit opinions. And I particularly appreciate the eagerness of the team in terms of wanting to be audited. I don't very often get asked, can you please do my audit now? And my team was actually looking forward to starting in earnest the audit, and that's genuine. I'm not just saying that because I'm here, but I think Emma will know that as well. That so I suspect you've got lots of questions. I'll answer what I can. I don't know all the answers at the moment, and I'd rather not tell you something that then I'll tell you another thing later on. So if I can answer it, I'll answer it. If I can't, I'll tell you.
Thank you, Suresh. Are there any questions from the committee? Alan.
Yeah, very disappointing. And I suppose I'd like to understand, first of all, any circumstances that might change that decision, but also just to understand a little bit about your criteria in reaching that decision and why Ealing in particular has fallen the wrong side of the cut-off.
What would need to be different, to be honest, is if those dates weren't as early as they are now for 23-20. As I said, we had a plan to do your audit and issue our opinion to enable you to publish your audited accounts by the end of May. Losing 3 months has been the main factor for us to consider. The fact that you've got open years of accounts for 2 years has been another factor that I've had to take into account. And of the 7 authorities that we do, we're only going to complete 2. Which that hopefully demonstrates to you that to do a full audit at this late in the day with these dates being changed has presented significant challenges for us. And obviously we're not alone in that in terms of audit suppliers around the country, but that has been another factor that we needed to take into account. How many can we actually complete in full to complete the and issue an audit opinion?
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee? No? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question, but that is a more critical nature. Can I ask this?
Sure, Safaz.
The positions ratio we are in at the moment, do you think, considering the audit and the position we are in, we are behind 3 years, do you think that will affect the funding from the central government to us on that basis, because we don't have, and we have disclaimer from 2 years? I am expecting, or they will be issuing the previous auditors, that will affect the funding to us by the central government?
I'm sure Emily will have a view, but I'm not aware of anything to suggest that you will be adversely affected in terms of funding as a result of any disclaimed audit opinions.
Right, okay.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, I will ask I beg your pardon.
Shall I just
Emily.
clarify? Yeah, we have had 2 years audit accounts outstanding for some time and haven't had any adverse impacts of that. As Suresh had said, the actual ministerial statement is really clear that there should be no adverse impact on local authorities as a result of disclaimers from the backstop. So we have a ministerial letter saying there shouldn't. So should we have any impact on our funding, I shall be taking that letter and marching it down.
Thank you for that addition, Emily. Any further questions? No, I will ask the committee to note the report, and presumably there aren't any recommendations apart from hurry up. Thank you. Okay, that moves us on to the annual work programme. I'm assuming that members have had a chance to have a look at the work programme. Can I ask if members agree? Thank you. And the next meeting is the 3rd of December for your diaries. And thank you very much for attending today.